Hello, my friends. How are you? Welcome to 30 Albums for 30 Years. I am your host, Jay Sweet. Today we take a look at the album, The Who, My Generation, Brunswick Records, recorded between April through November 1965 and released on December 3rd, 1965. A lot to talk about here. Let's get into it. So who are the Who? Said the owl.
Huh?
The group began as a boyhood friendship between singer Roger Daltrey, guitarist Pete Townshend, and bassist John Entwistle. They all grew up together in London. Townshend and Entwistle hooked up at first to play jazz, and then they fell in love with rock and roll. Then they met Roger Daltrey, a tough kid who was into rock and roll and gang-related activities, and so they recruited him to be a guitarist. In 1959, they started the band The Detours with Townshend and Daltrey on guitar, Entwistle on bass, Harry Wilson on drums, and Colin Dawson on vocals. In 1962, Wilson was replaced by drummer Doug Sandom, and after constant arguments between Dawson and Roger Daltrey, Dawson left the group and Daltrey took over as lead vocalist. After signing a management contract, the band then changed their name to The Who. So The Who now began performing with more regularity, and a record deal was on the horizon. But it was determined that Doug Sandom was not cutting it as a drummer, so they replaced him with Keith Moon. Keith Moon was drumming in a band called the Beachcombers. They were impressed by Moon's energy and aggressive playing style, and so the classic lineup of Roger Daltrey, Pete Townshend, John Entwistle, and Keith Moon was solidified. So now they are comfortable with their personnel. The Who needed a manager, and they hired a guy by the name of Peter Meaden. And Meaden changed everything about the band. They changed their look and image dramatically by having the members dress in the mod, M-O-D fashion. Mods were short for modernists. It was a London movement. Mods often dressed in tailor-made suits. They were into modern jazz, hence their name, and soul music, and they drove motor scooters. He even changed the group's name again, from The Who to The High Numbers. And then the band went into the studio and began recording singles of R&B and blues covers, but they didn't really generate much interest. So to separate themselves from the failures of their early singles, the band again became The Who, so changed their name back to The Who, found new management, and they also changed their performance style to make it more highly energetic, and they moved to a sound more connected to soul and R&B. And then after getting a reaction for accidentally breaking his guitar and a low ceiling, Pete Townshend realized that the audience enjoyed destruction and rebellion. They played into that image. Then Keith Moon took it to another level. He started kicking over his drums at the ends of shows. Later on, he would put dynamite in his drum kit and blow him up. And the band's performance then became as much about their music as their way of presenting what they called destructive art. The Who's rise to fame began in late 1964. More interest surrounding the group began when they released a single called I Can't Explain, and then the group secured a deal with Brunswick Records. The song became an underground hit, and The Who were invited to play on the popular television program Ready, Steady, Go in London, and then the demand to hear I Can't Explain led the single to climb the charts. And then they appeared on another show called Top of the Pops, and gained even further attention. So while the music was starting to connect, the relationships were not, though. And with the exception of Moon and Entwistle, who were tight, the band did not seem to like each other very much, and they fought regularly. But they kept it together. The music was bigger than their attitudes, I suppose. And then they scored a second hit with My Generation. And this led to the recording of their first record, the record we're going to discuss today, called My Generation. All right, so the album, My Generation. The record was made quickly and was released to promote the single, My Generation. Since it was so rushed, it did not sound very polished and showed a rawness and a roughness that later encouraged heavy rock and punk music. It did not chart at all initially in the US, but reached number 5 in the UK, and then became more widely accepted and praised in America well after its initial release. The album is significant because it contains 2 anthematic singles in The Kids Are Alright and My Generation. It's the first album by a legendary band, The Who, and because it helped inspire more aggression in rock and roll music. So throughout the course of this program, we're going to be talking more and more about The Who. 900 albums I'll be doing, and of course The Who will be in that list several times. But I'll give you some details about the band following this release. So following the release of My Generation, The Who grew to be one of the most successful and influential rock bands ever, selling over 100 million records. But of course, their fame came with a price, especially when it came to drummer Keith Moon. Moon was considered the wildest man in rock and roll and was well known for his insatiable appetite for partying and destruction. And after a party held by Beatle Paul McCartney, Keith Moon overdosed on pills in 1978 and died at the age of 32. After a short stint with fill-in drummer Phil Collins from Genesis, The Who hired ex-Small Faces drummer Kenny Jones, and they continued to work. Throughout the band's history, Roger Daltrey and Pete Townshend did not always see eye to eye. And in 1980, Daltrey took his first break from the band and did some acting and solo work. He did return, but officially left again in 1983. And at this point, Townshend focused on some solo work as well. The boys did reunite, Daltrey and Townshend, in 1985, and the band performed at Live Aid. And then in 1989, they embarked on a 25th anniversary tour. In 1990, the group was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and over the remaining years, the surviving founding members would occasionally perform together. But there was no real thought of a full-on reunion for a while. And then in 1999, the group did reunite for a tour as a 5-piece band with Zach Starkey on drums, that's the son of Ringo Starr, and keyboardist John Bundrick. In 2002, bassist John Entwistle died of a cocaine-induced heart attack in Las Vegas. And he was replaced on tour by bass specialist, very fine bassist named Pino Palladino. And from then on, The Who continued an on and off again relationship.